It's very easy, I believe, to feel helpless in circumstances such as we find ourselves in the kind of macro picture. There's always a macro picture and a micro picture. It's your own life locally, wherever you live, is one aspect of our existence. And the other is to the extent that we can really identify and know what's going on thousands of miles away from where we are. But there is a reasonable assumption that things are going on in a certain way. There are people reporting from local situations, as for example now what's going on in the Ukraine with Russia. And this is some thoughts I had in terms of one feels, I can say for myself, there's a helpless feeling in certain ways regarding this macro picture, as well as the microcosm of this. At the same time, when I observe the world now, and what I realize is that facts don't seem to matter that much. I think people have covered this idea that facts don't really matter that much. And it's very important for the owners to be able to control responses or predict the responses in people based on when factual, clear evidence of something is presented, and it makes no difference whatsoever to the way we would behave. This is one of the attributes of the owners, the bastards, if you want. I prefer calling them the bastards because they like mucky fucking in our life all the time. That's a whole other video, I think. What is that proclivity to find satisfaction in altering people's lives all the time? Anyway, the facts don't matter. I think this has been clearly established with the shit show over the last 2.5 years, that the facts don't matter. I'm not saying to everyone, but to a lot of people, which is primarily, I believe the owners are primarily concerned. They're not so much concerned with the renegades in society like myself and others who understand that you look at the world and you come to your own conclusions. You'll observe, we may make mistakes, but we observe and we say, based on the observation, I conclude, maybe I'm influenced as well, but I conclude that this is what it appears to me. This is how it appears to me. Not how someone tells me the way I should see it, but how it appears to me. So the owners, the bastards, are not too interested in me. Basically, the owners are interested in capturing a large group of the population that still may have the ability to be judgmental about the things that they observe, that they have a critical and moral compass, a moral compass primarily, and to what extent this can be obviously eradicated from a person's worldview to say, I will just accept what is told to me and live my life based on the instructions that I receive. It's a cold way of looking at things, and we look at our fellow human beings walking around, and the operating system that they're working in is based on an instructional operating system. Like, you're fundamentally functioning based on the things that you're being told to do, and you do it. So I wanted to just make this observation again, that the shit show over the last 2.5 years about a fictitious beer virus was a preliminary setup to something even more substantial to how our lives would be interfered with. And I think, I mean, a lot of people that have suggested that the injection is the disease and that this is going to end very badly for many people in terms of the way they will experience over time. I also think that many of these injections were actually placebos. There was a segment of the population that was tested on, but you can't, if it is in fact as dangerous as some people have suggested, some very highly qualified, credentialed people, doctors, Dr. Malone and um, Dr. Alexander, he's here in Canada quite often with the trucker convoy, all have voiced the clarity that they have around this particular intervention, this injection, that they say has been a death knell, a very dangerous introduction uh, into our genealogy, into our biology. So this past 2.5 years was a preliminary exercise. It's really difficult to comprehend this, considering the severity of this program that has been unleashed on us, the injection program, and the compliance to that. And it's primarily geared toward what I would say the segment of the population that is susceptible. They don't care about me or anyone else. Whether you take the injection, it doesn't matter. You're going to be who you are, and you know who you are. People who listen to me on my channel are fundamentally understanding what I'm saying in terms of they don't really give a shit about us. They care whether or not we make sense and we have facts obviously doesn't matter. So the program is geared toward a segment of the population that is going to be entirely and completely controlled by whatever mechanisms, like my last video, that triangle idea, to what extent this has implanted itself in the population. And here's what I think was the setup and why. To understand that possibly, if this is true, that 80% of the population has submitted to taking an injection, I mean worldwide, on all continents, the ones that really matter, I suppose. Africa doesn't really matter, I guess. There are places that don't really matter. And all the important players like China and US, Europe, Russia, India, all these important players have, for the most part, exhibited a high proclivity to comply. And this was the test, I think, to see. Now this is being escalated. The madness behind all of this now is escalating into talk in this conflict that has created the sort of Orwellian Pacifica and Eurasia, or whoever is at war in Orwell's iconic analysis of the world as he saw it, now is come to fruition in creating two opposing worldwide mega powers, if you want, to be in conflict. This has finally arrived. Now, to me, this is outrageous considering the amount of commerce that has gone on over the last 50 years between China and the West and Russia, and all of a sudden, why is it now? All of a sudden, Russia becomes arch enemy number one. It was propagated, Russian collusion, all that kind of stuff, in order to create the enemy without. The enemy is always without. You're always looking outside for the enemy. You never look for the enemy inside, because if you did, you wouldn't fall for the enemies that are created outside. These fictional entities that are going to annihilate us. Ironically, it may very well happen, this scenario. I doubt it, but we're being tested to see if we're willing to take the extra step to say, let's call it a major ending to everything. The idea, even the Trumpster, Orange Man, came out and made a speech about how dangerous this is to have conflict with a nuclear power such as Russia. And even though people like Owen Benjamin, the sage of narcissists, says there is no such thing as nuclear, well, He may proclaim anything, but the technology of splitting the atom, in fact, does exist. This is not fictional. In fact, you can see it every day happening in what they call nuclear plants. And no matter how much Mr. Owen Benjamin is in denial about this, these plants are creating thousands of exotic isotopes that are extremely dangerous to any living being on Earth. Micro beings, uh, the entomologists have discovered that there is no microbiological life in the exclusion zone in Chernobyl. Owen Benjamin, you need to do your research here to confirm that yes, the nuclear technology does exist and does affect life and does create aberrations in life forms, and not so much in wolves and deer that roam around. They don't live as long anymore, but they roam through the area. Oh, it's thriving with life. Chernobyl is thriving. These are creatures that come from all over because their enemy, their what is it? The hunters are no longer there to control them. So they have found a new home where there are no people killing them. Anyway, the point that I'm making here is the setup has happened. I believe the setup has happened. The setup where facts no longer matter. You can present anything, and this has probably been going on hundreds of years anyway in different versions, but now it is, I would say it's reaching epic proportions considering that such a huge segment of the population is willing to go that final step now. And maybe this is, I don't know, historically, I'm not familiar with all the mythologies around Atlantis and Lemuria and mud floods and technologies wiping out the human race. We've gone too far, idea, all these kind of things. But if I'm living through that right now, I am born at a time when we have an Atlantean or Lemurian episode happening. I can see how that happened because we suspend ourselves into the will of another rather than exercising the autonomy the way Larkin Rose, I like Larkin Rose, expresses his desire, what is called his anarchic, his point of view, which in a sense is a very responsible, self-motivating. It's like autonomous. Human being is an autonomous entity who has control over their own life. This is not anarchy. This is, people call it anarchy, but anarchy essentially is that people are in control of their own lives and they have a conscience. So they're not going to just rampage through the china shop and leave blood and guts behind them. No, this is not anarchy. Anarchy, the way he explains it, and it makes sense to me, is a responsible human being existing, coexisting with other responsible human beings. And you don't need big brother or daddy, governments that love us so much, they're willing to throw in the towel and say, let's get rid of everything. They love us so much. So this is the point. The lead up to this event, Russia, Ukraine, Russia, Ukraine, oh, Ukraine, bad Russia, good Ukraine. So you have this antagonism has been implanted now to the point. This obviously is disturbing, especially disturbing to me, if in fact the owners are willing to push this to the limit. Now they already know the outcome. This is what is most people don't realize. Oh, no, I'm sure they don't realize when, or maybe they do realize when they say, yes, bring it on. Bring on the nuclear confrontations. Bring it all on. Maybe people are much more enlightened than I am, even in their stupor, that they understand the outcome is already written. Lawrence of Arabia, it was written. So the idea that something is already understood to have a certain outcome may in fact be operative on this entire narrative that we're facing now. But it's still very disturbing. The idea that it's possible for the human race en masse, let's say in a very large format, not sure what would be left, but this segment of the human population has said, yeah, I don't need to live anymore. Give it let's draw a line under this and do a Lemuria on us or do an Atlantis on us. And the reason I'm very disturbed by this development, Russia-Ukraine, is because the shit show has set it up. It's not just like, yeah, we hate each other, we're going to blow each other up, and nothing will be left. I think there is more to this in terms of an outcome that is already realized. They believe they already have that outcome in place. I'll pause for a sec. So I'm not sure how far they're willing to push this conflict. And my original point in the video had to do with a feeling of helplessness, considering that it's very clear. The facts to me are very clear that this entire conflict idea has been orchestrated over a longer period of time. And the news doesn't talk about that. They just create scenarios for people to be focused on in terms of good guys, bad guys, all this kind of thing. How far? And the helpless feeling, what I wanted to say was the only way I counter this feeling of helplessness when there is such a dysfunction in what I understand to be a human being, how human beings are able to live up to their higher selves, how this is becoming displaced by the lower self, which is, quite frankly, it can be quite an ugly self, as we've noticed in history over and over again. The ugly self comes out. People that were considered to be rational, normal, civil society functioning well, and next thing you know, you've got camps and brutal murders going on, and all the innocent and vulnerable are targeted, and all this kind of stuff. And it's okay. So everybody knows helplessness, right? So the only thing that I understand in terms of myself is that, number one, I'm making these videos in order to confirm that people like me will find some encouragement or even solace, not soulless, solace, in knowing that we are not alone in this experience. That even though I have great difficulty to communicate what to me it appears to be self-evident, but I also understand that we come to an understanding over time. If we get sidetracked by the depravities, like to give in to these impulses, these kind of I don't like to call it biblical, like demonic, but they are impulses that are quite base in our nature. It has nothing to do with good or evil. It has to do with the fact that we have the ability to suspend ourselves into impulses that are very unwholesome. And I'm just making videos to confirm that I, for one, will not capitulate. I understand, and there are many other people like me that get a sense of purpose and meaning, why we're here right now. And as a painter, when I make my paintings, there is a lot of importance that I place or that I put on my feeling, my sensibility, my understanding of what's going on in some way is represented in my paintings. And I make, I don't know whether or not I'm delusional about this, but I say to myself, even though on the whole people are not interested in what I'm making, what I'm doing, not entirely true. There are people that are interested. But in the sort of bigger picture, I don't have really a foot in the door to being exposed to the world on a larger scale, like a lot of the owners have figured out how to isolate people that could ruffle some feathers in their network. But I suppose maybe if the art world, like I said, is 6,000 serious artists working, the ones that are being promoted now, it's a lot less. It might be 50 artists that are being promoted that endorse and confirm the owner's intentions. So these artists are not easily displaced out of the museums and places. You know, I've gone with friends of mine to museums and said, oh, you know, my work would just look as good. That's not the point. The point is that your work is not as good as the work that's there, because the work that's there confirms and affirms the program that they're painting under, orchestrated in a much larger context than they think, oh, I'm an artist, I pound my chest, I make work, and it should be loved because, oh, I'm just as good as all the other people that are being promoted. Why am I? Okay, well, those complaints are meaningless and useless. I've said this to friends of mine. You know, it comes up, oh, you know, my work would just look as good. And well, museums are not structured that way. Their purpose is to confirm the owner's intentions. Now, painfully, I've understood this probably in the last 10 years more and more. So it's not as much of a pressure I feel. Oh, why am I not getting my work out? And friends of mine say, well, you're not a very good promoter of your work. And yeah, that's true as well. But at the same time, I understand that I possibly could be doing a little bit more, but it wouldn't lead very far. Doesn't mean I stopped trying. I mean, I'm engaged right now to find representation for my work. So it's not like I've stopped doing it. But anyway, the idea of feeling helpless, you counter that helpless feeling by confirming to each other that we know what's going on. Whether or not we can prevent it, obviously, the steamroller is quite substantial. I believe there is a future for people like myself and like-minded people. There is a future. I cannot not think that way, but they're certainly pushing this in a very dangerous, over the top direction. And the shit show was a lead up to, I believe, what is happening now in this epic confrontation between people that have weapons, real weapons of mass destruction, not Saddam Hussein hiding in a hole somewhere. This is actually people who do have the ability to take out substantial segments of the population. I mean, really radical, like Georgia Guidestone radical. That the things they knocked over when it was no longer necessary. We've made our statement. 500 million people left. They understand there is an outcome, and if that's it, holy shit! It's like what is it? Cliff High's thing, the big bad or whatever he called it, as and he has a great deal of optimism. I think I'm not crazy about this fellow. He's got a lot of rage pent up in him from whatever, but he does make good points. Interestingly, a lot of the people that I find offensive, even though they say good things, have this unresolved shit going on in them all the time. It like pollutes whatever they're saying. I have a hard time with these people. Anyway, I think, yeah, I covered what I wanted to say about the whole 2.5 years have led to this. So we need to be vigilant and reaffirm that moral nature, that what Larkin Rose refers to, that autonomy, that we need to assert this in our local circumstances, and and just find our allies in relation to this segment of the population that I identify with. Do not take injections. Do not follow blindly. Still look at facts. Make sure that you understand for yourself what is purposeful, meaningful to you personally. You don't need an interpreter to tell you what's meaningful in your life. You can do that yourself. And that is the hope I have of engaging with people and invigorating this feeling in people that say, I'm an autonomous human being. I'm not going to be manipulated into doing something I don't want to do.